Selecting an appropriate game type for a tabletop exercise is a pretty crucial decision. It impacts the effectiveness of the overall training or the scenario when planning the session. Choosing the right game type not only engages participants in the right way, but it ensures that the learning objectives are met. So I've tried to create a bit of a structured approach to trying to make a decision. It's obviously a guide, it's the way that I think about it. Once you have your head around the different types of games, you can definitely start to have your own ways of selecting what type of game. You'll probably have some that you're more familiar with or more confident with. So bear with me as we look through this very complicated diagram that I've put up, but all the orange boxes contain all of the different types of games that we were talking about in the last lesson. And we're just going to go through step by step from the top and break down why that choice matters for that particular game selection. So let's zoom in on the top here. What game type should you use? First of all, very first question, most important thing, do you know what your aim is? I've mentioned this before, it's very important. If you haven't had a discussion or a thinking about what your aim is, this is where you brainstorm. This is where you actually come up with your objective about what you want to achieve, and that's definitely going to inform the rest of your choice. Moving down, we want to know how many players are going to be there. Is it going to be one player? If so, you might want to choose a solo game. That's totally okay. There are many types of games, of solo games, like journaling games that exist. And when it comes to quantifying the players, I've just broken it up to, do they fit on a small table? Is it a big table? Or is it more than a big table? Looking at the small table a bit more closely, we want to just ask again, what is the objective? Now you actually have the objective in your mind, you'll probably understand. Is the objective for practicing structured group voting? If so, you've got a committee game. If it's improvisation or confidence or communication for small groups, theatre games. But if it's anything else to do with hypothesis testing or generated, you've got to move down the tree. Big table games are usually about hypothesis generating and testing, so I've moved them straight down. And if you've got a large group or more than a big table, if your objective is hypothesis generation and testing, again, we're going to go straight down, but there are some other fields here which might fit. If you're doing a large field test operation, you want to use a functional exercise. If you want to put on a show or a performance, use a spectacle game. If you have multiple mini games with a particular narrative that you want to test, that's a mega game. And if you're after teaching a specific skill or task or concept, a seminar game might be useful for a large group. Going down now, if we have a hypothesis that needs testing, this is where we split up if the hypothesis is being tested or if it's being generated. Do we have an idea already that we want to test, or do we not know something about the situation or the context or the cause, and are we trying to find that? Sometimes we want to do both test and generate in a dynamic scenario. They're the more complicated games, and they go straight down. We'll talk about them in a second. Let's say we want to test a hypothesis. How many hypotheses do we have? Do we not have enough? In that case, competing hypothesis is the right type of game to play. We actually want to generate more hypotheses. If we only have one leading hypothesis, that can be strategically dangerous. So devil's advocate might be the game that we want to test if we're only testing one hypothesis. If we have two, we want to do an A-B game. If we have many early contenders, we want to do key assumptions checking to try and see which of those hypotheses might be leading. And you can always run through multiple versions of this. Let's just say you don't have enough and then you come up with a bunch, so you have too many. Then you want to check their key assumptions, narrow it down to two, run an A-B game, and when you have a leading one, play devil's advocate. Great. But what about if we don't have a hypothesis and we need to generate one? From the situation or the event that we are looking at and analyzing, do we want to look forwards in time, backwards in time, or from the outside in? Thinking about external factors. Outside in requires outside in thinking. Looking backwards, trying to think about cause of effects and chain analysis, we want to use backwards what if thinking. And if we're looking forward in time from the event, how likely is that event? If it's a high probability, i.e. it's already happened and we know that it's happened, therefore the probability is 100%, or if it's a very likely thing to happen soon and we want to know what happens way in the future, we want to use alternative futures. If it's a low probability, then the situation or event under analysis is probably going to have a high impact. So we're going to have low chance, high impact thinking games. If the situation or game doesn't fit any of the current questions we've asked, we're going to be moving on down to larger simulations, more complex and dynamic situations. Here, I want to split these up into two components. And the question to ask is, what is the most important thing to simulate in this game? Is it physical elements like time and space? Or is it relationships, diplomacy, choices, narratives, more softer elements? Let's have a look at the softer elements first. The question to ask is, what perspectives do the players need to take? Is it the perspective of an adversary that we're interested in? If so, red teaming is the option. If it's a particular organization or person or a series of those, maybe role-playing is the right one to use. If it's a command or a tactical perspective where you're in charge of a group of different people, then it might be a matrix game. Given that matrix games are better than war games when it comes to things like relationships, diplomacy, and soft elements. There are two extra perspectives that I've included here. We mentioned metagames. If you want people to break that fourth wall and think about outside the game, metagames are quite advanced to design, but they can be used here. And if you want the players to be omnipotent and know everything, like a godlike perspective, a narrative game is probably useful. Moving across to the other side, if we're talking about physical game elements, again, the question to ask is, what perspective should the players take? The reason why I'm asking this on both sides is because games that have both physical elements and soft elements can be designed for adversarial red teaming, role-playing a particular person or organization, or matrix gaming, command or tactical things. They just need more crunchier rules. However, in particular, deciding between a matrix game and a war game is really about how you want to resolve actions. Do you want to do it by discussion in a matrix game or by predetermined rule sets that are common in war games? So there we have it, a large framework in how to choose games. Going through it from the top to the bottom again, we just want to know what the aim is, how many players we have, what's the specific objective? Are we testing or are we generating hypothesis? Does it have physical elements in the game, or is it more softer relationships, diplomacy, etc.? And what perspective do the players need to take? They're the main questions that I outlined to begin with, and that's the way I categorize and think about what type of flavor of game or what type of tool we need to use. We now have a little test where I've got to give you some aims about games, and I want you to ask yourself, what is the tool that needs using for this particular game? Start from the white box up the top, run down and see if you can figure out the best type of category of game to use for these particular questions. Good luck. Thanks for watching. These lessons will be dropping weekly on YouTube, but if you want to get them all right now, you can take the foundation course for free on our website, where you will also get the lesson notes, summaries, assignments, checklists that guide you through all the learning objectives we've covered. At the end of that course, you'll also get a certificate of completion and an invite to our directory and community where you can meet some other game masters and use the Long Game Project as a platform to showcase your work. If you want to take your game mastery further, completion of this course is a prerequisite to unlock the advanced professional course, along with the Game Master track, where we dive deeper into the content and further along the skill tree. You can also check out some of our other free tools in the description below, including our tabletop exercise starter kit, our scenario generator, the trove of existing scenarios, our SOP checklist library, and our new RPG character sheet, CV, and LinkedIn template, which is really cool. I did mine this morning, and now all my network knows that my dump stat is probably Dex, and I'm definitely neutral good. Roll on.